This is where actually nonprofits have a really good leg up on for-profit businesses. Is the first step to running a business effectively is getting a great understanding of your values, vision, and mission for that business. So nonprofits have that baked into their ethos from the beginning. Taking that and being able to tweak that just a little bit, have an understanding that by being able to do more good in the world, you actually have a stronger motivation than a lot of for-profit businesses, just because you've already established why you're in the business world.
You're listening to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast. Here's your host, Stu Swineford. So you're hearing a little bit of a different voice this week. But hi, I'm James, marketing expert and a cohort of Stu, whom I've had the pleasure of working with over the last few years. On this special episode of Relish This, I'm taking over the reins to take some time to chat with Stu about his new book, Mission Uncomfortable: How Nonprofits Can Embrace Purpose-Driven Marketing to Survive and Thrive. Stu has been working on this book for quite some time, and it is packed full of useful information and content for how nonprofits can grow their audiences and help build a stronger relationship with various stakeholders. In this introductory conversation, Stu and I go over the book and discuss how inbound marketing can be applied to your nonprofit. We discuss how marketing should be seen as an investment to expand your mission rather than an expense. We also look at the audience engagement cycle to move a stakeholder from piqued interest to being inspired and becoming an ongoing champion for your organization. This was a great conversation, and Stu and I had a great time discussing the book. If you want to get your own free copy, head over to missionuncomfortablebook.com to check it out. Until then, we hope you enjoy this conversation. Here we go. Well, hi, Stu. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great, James. It's good to be on the show with you for a change.
On your own show.
Yeah, exactly. It's this will be a fun new experience. It's been a minute since I've been a guest on a podcast, so it's interesting to and very meta or something to be a guest on one's own show, I guess.
I know. The one thing I will say is just don't be like super aware of the questions. Just feel like you're answering them like a real guest.
Okay.
Well, so something new and exciting happened for you, and you have now finally published your first big book.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as a big book, but yeah, with the help of you and a number of other people, including my co-author, Aaron Rickson, managed to get this book out the door, and it's called Mission Uncomfortable. And I think it's going to be a really cool resource for nonprofits and purpose-driven leaders out there really trying to figure out their next steps in marketing.
So give us a little bit of an overview of what the book, so you say it's going to help with purpose-driven marketing. How does that do that?
Yeah, well, it outlines our framework around, or our philosophy around marketing, particularly in this nonprofit and purpose-driven space, where there's a little bit of a friction that people experience with the idea of marketing. Marketing, over the years has sort of managed to get itself a little bit of a bad name. And particularly in the nonprofit world, there's a resistance to it. There's this idea on occasion that people feel that any money that they invest in marketing or in other activities is every dollar that they spend there is a dollar that comes out of their mission. And so the first part of the book really tries to frame or reframe that narrative to consider marketing as an investment and something that should create a return on that investment, and one that is going to allow you to expand your mission. So if you can reach 10 people by spending $1,000 on marketing, thinking about how many more people you could reach if you expanded that investment and coming at it from that perspective. Then it really goes into this idea of the audience engagement cycle, which is how we kind of envision marketing working. And essentially we think of that as 4 main phases that aren't necessarily linear, but it starts with attraction, then connection, then bonding, and then inspiring one's audience and one's stakeholders. And so we talk a lot about each of those phases in the book and how nonprofits and purpose-focused folks can engage in any and all of those areas to help really engage with their stakeholders.
That's amazing. It's so nice because and you and I have been working with it for a really, really long time, but something that always goes through with it is the book is nice because it's a really strong framework for how to build out your marketing, and not in a way that it feels like it's overwhelming or taking on more projects. It just feels like it's a natural progression into how you're running your business.
Well, I certainly hope so. The idea here is to try and help empower people to have a good understanding of each of those phases of that life cycle so that they can take small steps. One of the things that we talk about a lot is this idea of eating the whole elephant, or trying to go for a touchdown on every play. And ultimately, every journey starts with a step, and the next step of that journey is the second step. You don't have to travel that entire distance at one time. And people get a little bit overwhelmed by marketing, by just thinking about all of the things that are going to need to be put into play, starting from that connection or that attraction all the way through to that inspire. And if you try and wrap your arms around that entire package at once, it becomes really daunting. And so being able to slow down and take small steps and have some actionable activities that one can take to help people become stronger, build stronger relationships in each of those phases is really what this book's all about.
So where did this book originally come from? Because this seems like a very well thought out kind of process and stuff. So obviously this has been on your mind for a long time.
Yeah, it has. I mean, we've done a lot of work in the for-profit space as well as the nonprofit space. And the idea of this came from a series of blog posts that we published several years ago that were really geared toward this idea of a marketing funnel. And that really felt like it worked well in the for-profit space, but there was something that wasn't quite right in the nonprofit space. And what was really interesting is that, and I think you actually helped me with this, is we discovered through some analytics assessment that there were some blog posts that we had written back in 2016 or 2015 even that were still getting a lot of traction. And so I think my original idea was, oh, well, why don't we take these posts and make sure that they're up to snuff and kind of repackage them as one long form kind of booklet. Once we started doing that, and once we dove into that process, we really realized that the language within those posts was great for the for-profit space, but it needed some tweaking for the nonprofit space. And then this just took off and really became kind of a labor of love where we expanded on it and brought it to where it is today, which I think is probably a first edition. I'm sure that our thinking on this will continue to evolve, and we'll continue to have some new ways of thinking that we'll bring to the table. But for the time being, I think that that's really the genesis of it, was to try and bring together this thinking around the audience engagement lifecycle and this process that can help nonprofits really start to thrive and survive in a competitive, challenging world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's been interesting too, going back and listening to, you're up to what now, 20, at this moment, 24, 25 episodes published.
Yeah, we recorded our 37th episode last night, I think, for Relish This, which is the podcast you're listening to. And yeah, I think we're booked out until early June right now in terms of when episodes are going to drop. So
yeah, and it's really interesting too, because listening to all of the stories, and listening to all of the different nonprofits, you start to hear those commonalities of themes of, we don't know, how or where to reach out to any of our constituents. We don't, understand what is that process to turn a volunteer into an advocate, into a donor, into your organization. And I think something that the book does really well is it kind of helps you figure out those narratives of how you take someone that comes to your organization in one way and help them become that champion and advocate for you in a completely different way.
Yeah, we see that attract phase is the first step, and that's really trying to give nonprofits some ideas on how to get people um, to start that engagement process. So how do you get somebody who's a total stranger, whether that's maybe someone who's found you on social media or did a Google search for something that they were trying to find out more information about? How do you take that person and bring them into your zone of influence? And once they're there, um, typically people have landed on a website, or they've maybe gotten to an optimized landing page, but they still haven't actually connected with you. So the second phase of that process is getting them to connect. And so we see that as an opportunity to create a value exchange where people are willing to give up their email address in order to get something of value. And so whether that's it depends on your nonprofit what that might be, but essentially informational content that people might be willing to engage with and share their information in order to get that piece of value. I'm not being very eloquent about it right now because I'm thinking about a couple of things here at once, but ultimately, once you get people into the fold, they've essentially raised their hand. So getting that email address is really turns that person from kind of a cold opportunity to a warm opportunity, because they have taken the initiative to say, yes, I'm interested in this and I'm ready to go. From there, we like to escalate and see how there might be opportunities to develop that relationship. And like any relationship, jumping to the "will you marry me" when you've just met somebody rarely works. So we have created this framework under which you can escalate that and build that relationship over time so that it becomes a much stronger connection. And that's where that bond phase comes into play, where you're really trying to create back and forths. You're trying to create opportunities to, bring people even more closely into the fold. And then let's just take donations. Actually, let's take volunteer as a initial activity that you'd like people to engage with your organization. So somebody has become a volunteer. They then can enter the inspire phase, where you try to get them to become more than just a volunteer. So not only can they join you and your team on projects or volunteer their time for outreach or any number of volunteer activities, but they might then want to donate as well, or they might want to share their experience and share the great things that you're doing as an organization with their communities. And so Inspire becomes kind of this cyclical opportunity to turn people who are actively engaged into brand ambassadors for your organization. And then the process just continues. As they tell more people about your organization, you start that process again with that new person, where you're attracting, connecting, bonding, and inspiring.
And something that is super important to reinforce throughout the whole entire book is that the relationship that you're building with anybody, no matter how they come into your organization, it's an ongoing relationship. So once the service is provided, or the event that the volunteer is at is over, that's not the end of your interaction or conversation with that person. That you're building something that's ongoing for forever, that you're continually keeping up communication and engagement with them, so that when the next opportunity comes up, they're there for you as an advocate or donor or whatever capacity they can be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, one of the things that we do see is as a challenge with a lot of nonprofits is there's a dopamine hit that occurs whenever we land a new volunteer or a new donor. And the tendency is to try and chase those kind of exciting stats where, oh, we need to add more new donors. We need to keep, getting new volunteers, when in actuality, the easier, the lower hanging fruit is to re-engage and continue the engagement with those people who have already signed on. And so if we can change the mindset in the nonprofit community to really focus at least as much attention on that inspire phase as the attract and connect phases, there's a ton of opportunity there. Those people are boiling hot leads. They're ready to do more in a lot of cases. And if you do a good job of continuing to deliver value on that relationship that you've built, that can go a long way.
So Stu, with the book coming out, and you've now talked to, 40, 50 different nonprofits, what is the biggest thing that you see nonprofits aren't doing right now that they could just immediately jump on to doing?
There are a lot of activities that nonprofits can engage with. I would say one of the things that we see a lot is a real disconnect between the activities that nonprofits are doing to attract their audience and that next step of the conversation, which is this idea of connecting. So one of the things that we do see is the language and the information that's being put out there, whether that's running ads through a Google grant or outreach on social media. There tends to be a disconnect between the language that's being used in those attract conversations that are starting to happen and the connect conversations that are starting to happen. And so one of the first things that nonprofits can do is really align that messaging to make sure that if somebody sees an ad that's asking for volunteer opportunities or bringing on new volunteers, that the landing page that they get sent to is aligned with that ad. That tends to be one of the first things that we do see is just a real disconnect there. People tend to send to one common landing page that isn't aligned with that initial message.
Well, and I was going to say the other thing too, is consistently that call to action. One of the things that whenever we look at a new website or work with like any organization, for profit or nonprofit, it's always like, are you really telling your audience what you want them to do?
Yeah, nonprofits tend to fall particularly hard in this space where, and this isn't uncommon to for-profits either. But one of the things that we do see is the call to action is either very unclear, or there are so many different calls to action on a given page that people just have a really hard time figuring out what action they need to take or the desired action on that page. And so, repetition is pretty key on those, non-landing pages in terms of really trying to get people to get a good understanding of what it is you want them to do. So figure out one specific activity that you'd like people to take and kind of, I wouldn't say hammer on that, but definitely give them the understanding that this is the next step of that relationship. Or on a landing page, make sure that you're getting your value proposition across. People don't wake up every day just thinking, okay, how am I going to give away some of my money today? It's an uphill battle. And so where in the for-profit world, we tend to think of funnels where you just kind of stuff people up in the top of the funnel and then eventually a sale will kind of come out of the bottom. It's really an uphill battle in the nonprofit world because the excitement that one is going to get has to be generated before they give that donation or take that step to become a volunteer. So in the for-profit world, we collect their money and then they get that excitement. In the nonprofit world, we kind of have to generate that excitement before we collect the revenue that they're willing to share.
Oh, how interesting. That's a really subtle but important way to kind of look at that value system as well.
Yeah, it flips it on its head, and it definitely is something to consider in terms of where you are in that process or where your organization kind of plugs in.
Well, and so that brought up something interesting, kind of flipping a little bit back to the impetus for the book. What made you as Relish want to focus on nonprofits, and why did you decide to take, a lot of this for-profit business acumen and try to apply it to the nonprofits?
Yeah, there are a couple answers there. I guess I will start with the why nonprofits. And one of the things that I noticed, and this was something that happened to me, several years ago, is really started thinking about those engagements and those clients that brought me the most satisfaction. And all across our organization, we've always been very purpose focused, and we're a 1% for the Planet partner. We have historically done a lot of pro bono type work, and also have worked quite a bit in the nonprofit space. And I was working for one of our great partners on a project that needed to go out shortly after Memorial Day. And it was Sunday afternoon, and it was a gorgeous day. And I was banging away on my keyboard, working to try and get some landing pages polished up for them, so that this outreach that they were doing the next week would really shine. And I thought to myself, you know what? It is 2:00 on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and I'm not very upset here about the fact that I'm working on this day. And I wasn't upset at all. It didn't even occur to me. I was thrilled to be doing it. And so that was where this kind of light bulb went off in my head that, if I can do more of this, then that's just going to be a win for me and a win for everybody else. And it's going to make, my life that much more fulfilling, and hopefully, be able to create some good in the world. And so that was when, we really shifted focus and really started focusing extremely heavily on the nonprofit space. And the second half of your question, remind me what that was, James.
Why you decided to start taking all the, for-profit marketing, and putting the effort into converting that over to nonprofit.
Right. So really it was looking at how for-profits engage and seeing where there were psychological differences between a for-profit audience and a nonprofit audience. And ultimately, nonprofits are businesses too. And so all of the learning that we have, been able to accomplish in the for-profit world over the last 13 plus years. I mean, I've been doing marketing since I was about 22 years old. So almost 30 years now. And, all of that learning over the course of that period of time, business is really business. And even if you're a nonprofit, you're still running a business. And so if you're running a business that is, that is healthy and functional, coming at that, and this is where actually nonprofits have a really good leg up on for-profit businesses, is the first step to running a business effectively is getting a great understanding of your values, vision, and mission for that business. So nonprofits have that baked into their ethos from the beginning. Taking that and being able to tweak that just a little bit, have an understanding that by being able to do more good in the world, you actually have a stronger motivation than a lot of for-profit businesses, in that they're just out to earn money in a lot of respects, particularly if they haven't done their values, vision, and mission exercises and really dug down into the why of why they're doing all of this, why they're taking on all this responsibility. But in the nonprofit space, it's really just a subtle tweak to standard business practices, and one that's not a very big leap, and one where you actually do have a leg up just because you've already established why you're in the business world.
Well, and that's one of the things that I really liked about the book, because I remember our initial conversations when we talked about like using that framework and applying it to nonprofits, and then watching as you apply that to nonprofits in the podcast episodes that you do with the nonprofits that, Relish is currently working with, to see those aha moments, to see those moments where it clicks in their head of like, oh, we've already done all of this work. We're just not applying it in this formula, and once they do that, like seeing the stress fall off of shoulders, or better understanding how they take that conversion and seeing where, they're having the hiccups, and those hiccups going away almost immediately.
Yeah, there are a lot of subtle tweaks that one can make to to one's outreach to improve the conversion and how effectively those relationships are being built. And that's where, just kind of standard marketing starts to come in. There are certainly different motivations for nonprofit audiences. And so keeping those in mind and applying, this framework to your systems, knowing who your audiences are, and what motivates them, that's usually the first step. And yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to just get it out there, in kind of this book form, so that people would have a resource that they could refer to, when they needed some help.
And it's a beautiful looking book. The graphics are great. They explain everything really well. The colors are great, and it's a super easy read. So yeah, it's a great reference material to be able to kind of review and really ask yourself those hard hitting questions as you look at where you are, in the cycle of anybody that's within your organization.
Yeah. And I'd like to mention that the book is not something that we're charging for. We'd like to get this into as many hands as possible, and feel free to share those. The other thing that we've built alongside the book is a scorecard that enables you to kind of go through your marketing efforts and give yourself kind of a score on each of the, each of those phases of engagement, so that you have a good understanding of where you are and where you're trying to go. And, if you've talked with me at all in the past, you'll understand that I try to frame things in a real positive way. So we don't look at any score as a negative. It's just a benchmark, and it's a starting place, from which you can really grow your efforts and see how to create a path for success for your organization.
Great. Well, Stu, where can people go to be able to get this book?
So the best place to go is missionuncomfortablebook.com. And from there, you can download the book, you can take your score, and we'll send that to you, and find out other ways to engage. But ultimately, that's the best place to find it. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn under Stuart Swineford, or Stu Swineford, actually. So if you do a search for me on LinkedIn, you can find me there as well. And you can also just engage with us at relishstudio.com, where you can sign up for weekly tips and information that's delivered direct to your mailbox.
Well, Stu, I'm not going to lie. This has been a very long journey to get from when you and I first started working all the way to the book, but I'm really excited to be with you on this journey. As you put this book out and work with nonprofits, I think it's a huge value upsell to everybody that that gets to be able to use it.
We hope so. And certainly if you download the book, we'd love to know what you think. So you can always hit me up at Stu, S-T-U, at relishstudio.com if you have any questions or want to give me some feedback.
Well, thanks for chatting with me today, Stu. I appreciate that.
Oh, it was a pleasure, James. I'll talk to you soon. All right, there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks for listening. If you would like to learn more about how to apply the audience engagement cycle to expand your organization's mission, there are two things you can do. Right now, you can go to missionuncomfortablebook.com to download a copy of my book. And while you're there, you can get your purpose-driven marketing score to see where you can unearth some gold for your organization. If you'd like to listen to back episodes of the show or sign up to be a guest, go to relishstudio.com/podcast. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week for another great episode.